So the traditional Latin Mass is exploding in popularity. And I think due in large part to, online Catholicism, Catholic YouTubers. And also, when people take a look at the sort of societal moral decay going on, they have this calling to kind of go back in time into a place of more, obviously, tradition, reverence, sound doctrine. They want to go inward because it's more contemplative, meditative experience. And I certainly don't blame them. I was definitely one of those people. And to those of us that have experienced the Latin Mass, we can truly attest to how otherworldly it is and how just right it feels in our hearts and in our souls. It's not about feeling too. It's about doctrine and ecclesiology and theology and all these other things. That's not the intent of this video. And don't let the thumbnail and title confuse you either. This is not meant to be accusatory or to inflame an already large liturgy wars going on online, which I'm kind of, quite frankly, I understand where it comes from, and I think a lot of it, makes sense. I'm not trying to contribute to that. So this is not meant to come across as punching down at those people that have chosen not to go, because there are a number of reasons why somebody would choose not to go. I want to get into two reasons that held me back personally, and it's a matter of prudence for everybody's individual household. But for me, it was this calling to go deeper, to deepen my formation, to strengthen my formation, and not just mine, but the formation of my family, to give them a greater fighting chance, particularly my children, of retaining the faith as they got older. And so I stumbled upon this Twitter thread by a mutual of mine. His name is TLM Anon. And there was this article in, I think it was the publication is 1 Peter 5. And talking about how there are some people that, walk around complain about the lack of reverence at, let's say many modern Novus Ordos, if you will, and how they feel called to go deeper. And then oftentimes there'll be people in their lives, asking them, hey, come check out the Latin Mass, come check out the Latin Mass. And these people will always say that they'll come check it out, but they never end up doing it. So they end up just continuing to complain. They continue to sort of church shop or church hop, if you will, and they never end up going to check out the traditional Latin Mass. Or if they do, it never really sticks. Well, I was certainly one of these people, and that's precisely what this is about. Two main reasons that I think hold a lot of people back from going, because these are two main reasons that prevented me from going until I really took a deeper and, rather humiliating look at my line of reasoning here. Because I had, have a wonderful friend in Brian Holdsworth. We go to the same parish, and he was one of those guys, hey man, come back. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I'll come back. And eventually I did. And it's been one of the greatest decisions I've ever made for myself and for my family. And the fruits of going have been tremendous already in just, 3 or so short months of going consistently. And the first reason was that I didn't want to reorient my schedule accordingly. So our Mass is like midday, smack dab in the middle of the day. Travel is not really an issue. It's like 15 minutes away from us, but it's like right in the middle of the day. And when you have like 3 children that you're wrangling, 3 small children that you're wrangling, number one, the drive can be a big deal. There's many parishioners that go to our parish that drive several hours to go there. One of my friends, Rob at Avoiding Babylon, I think he drives like 2 or 3 hours each way to go. And now that's a serious commitment. Now, having the experience that I do now, I certainly would do that as well. So for the longest time, I worked 6 days a week. I still do, but I would work, late into, midday or early afternoon on Saturdays. So family time was kind of limited to just Sundays or like the afternoons on Saturdays typically. And I would also tend to exercise on Saturday afternoons too. So it kind of like limited the whole day. We didn't really have a day where we could spend together because I was working throughout the week. And then obviously here on Saturdays, like I'm mentioning right now. And so when Sundays would come around, it would be a lot easier to go to our local Novus Ordo. That was a 45-minute Mass. It's very close by. It's something that we felt comfortable in going, and we didn't really have to think about, okay, am I dressed formally enough? And while these things don't really matter that much at the traditional Latin Mass, you start to think about these things a little bit more because everybody else is dressed rather nicely. And actually, I've come to really grow and love that fact that you're kind of putting on your Sunday best and you're presenting yourself to the congregation, to the Lord on this special day in a little bit more of a formal setting. Frustrating at first, maybe a little bit costly at first, but in the end, I've grown to really appreciate it. And so with Mass being midday on a Sunday around 12:30 and Mass being 90 minutes long, it kind of interfered with our children's sleep schedule, eating schedule, etc. So essentially it would require us to, wake up early on Sundays, which we do anyways. But the entire day is in preparation of going to Mass. And that's a sacrifice that I really didn't want to make. It was rather humiliating having to face this, where you're like, oh, the traditional at Mass isn't for us. But for me, that was just plain cope. I didn't want to make the necessary sacrifices, it being just 15 or 20 minutes away. So the travel wasn't an issue, to reorient my schedule until I decided, hey, I'm just going to work a couple hours on a Saturday morning, so we have the whole day to do, activities, and not having to just save it for Sunday. I canceled some, client calls and client visits. I chose not to work out anymore on Saturdays, so that day could be spent doing some fun stuff with the family. And so on Sundays we could focus on going to Mass. And so what resulted in this change was a rather frustrating experience at a local Novus Ordo. I did a video on that already called Novus Ordo Fatigue. If you want to check it out, I would encourage you to do so. The video did rather well, surprisingly. And so I didn't actually want to take on the necessary sacrifice, the necessary inconvenience to reorient my exercise schedule, my work schedule, so I could focus on Sundays, having that whole day being in preparation to going to Mass. And so preparations had started as soon as we wake up. We get their eat schedule, sleeping schedule, etc., their whole schedule oriented. So we're ready to go to Mass at 11. And it's a multi-hour ordeal. So not only are we in Mass for 90 minutes, we're getting there about 30 or 40 minutes early. So my middle daughter can sleep, so they can eat before. And so, my son, who's like 7-8 weeks old, at least at the time of this video, can be fed and put back into the carrier, and we can go in. And then, not to mention, the next challenge comes and poses as a challenge with regards to keeping my children, wrangled in the pews for a 90-minute Mass, which is difficult. It's funny because at the same time, typically right around the middle of the Mass, all the kids start to kind of go a little nuts. But so I can certainly relate to all the large families having to deal with this struggle. So you're not like fully immersed in it, but it's a necessary and worthy sacrifice. And you realize that with children, the consistency of doing something like this, they develop this Mass muscle as time goes on. And I've already started to see the fruits of this change in my wife, in my daughters. My daughters seeing my wife veil, seeing all the women, all the little girls veil, they've chosen to veil, and it's the most beautiful thing ever. And it's not just about the aesthetics, right? They're immersed in the Mass, the smells, the bells, the whole overall ambiance. It's something that really captivates their little souls, and they implicitly learn. My daughters learn to pray the Rosary not by sitting with me in a circle, praying the Rosary with me necessarily. That's not really effective when they're that young. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and like I said, an 8-week-old. It's by doing other things and kind of having this in the background, and now they can kind of recite all the prayers with me. And now they sit with me, and it's been months of having developed this, of that implicit learning, where they've come to know how to do these things. And it's been similar at the Mass, where maybe they may not be paying attention, but as time goes on, I can see the fruits start to materialize and be made manifest in their behaviors at Mass and otherwise. So I didn't want to face the fact that I didn't want to make the necessary sacrifices to reorient my schedule in doing this. And so now, with the perspective that I have, if it was an hour, 2 hours away, I would still make that drive and I'd still make that sacrifice, because of the fruits that come with it, because of the sound doctrine, the reverence, etc. Which leads me to my next point, is the community. I didn't want to go to the traditional Latin Mass because at times that I did go, I felt like people were rather closed off and into themselves and all this other stuff, that they felt like that they had these walls up. Now, at certain traditional Latin Mass parishes, that certainly can be true, but that came to be completely untrue and just a fabrication that I've made, a preconceived notion in my own mind. If you will, to use a Zoomer term, I was coping. When you're used to a Novus Ordo, and this is not to disparage the Novus Ordo at all. There's a lot of people that go to a reverent Novus Ordo, or they're serious Catholics that don't have another choice. This is not, again, me punching down. You're used to kind of being validated as soon as you walk in. You kind of get the greeter, you get people in the pews, and everybody's kind of talking, and it's kind of like a social event before, hopefully not during, but certainly after. And so when you're used to that kind of environment where people are acknowledging you, especially as soon as you get to church, it's easier to feel like, oh, this I feel more welcomed here. People are nicer here. They're more welcoming. They're validating me. We have all to have that need inside of us as human beings to be validated. But when you're going to the Latin Mass, you got these large families that are wrangling their children, and they're in this sort of interior contemplative mode, especially before and during Mass. So that closed off sense that I got, like, oh, these trads are kind of stuffy and into themselves, is totally not true. Because what it actually required of me to do was actually to make some effort. And so when Mass ends, and everybody would go downstairs and socialize, the veils come off, so to speak, literally and figuratively. A lot of women would still veil. My wife would still veil, and that's when the community, the beauty of the community came out in full force. It just required some actual effort from me, and required me to really understand and realize that, I don't need to be validated here. This is not about me at all. This is not about any of us in the congregation at all. This is about the Lord, the sacrifice of the Mass and the Eucharist, and the priest doing this on our behalf. And so I had to kind of dismantle this idea. I was used to like low church, evangelical, Protestant churches where like it was like this big social event, before and oftentimes during. But kind of similarly in the Novus Ordo, where you're being greeted and you're being, acknowledged as soon as you come in. So when you kind of get this impression, you walk in, everybody's veiled, everybody's kind of dressed up. You're like, man, these trads are stuffy. And people are, would report having these like negative experiences. And again, not to, not acknowledge that, because there have been certainly negative experiences in a TLM with regards to how other congregants would interact with them. I never got that. This was a preconceived idea in my head because this is what I thought. I wasn't being validated. And I actually had to, just like the first point of reorienting my schedule, put in some effort to actually get involved in the community. And once we did, these things happened really quickly. After a couple of weeks, multiple families would be coming up to us, introducing themselves, inviting us over to their homes. And this happens every single week without fail. Because you see, to be part of a traditional Latin Mass community, as big and as popular as it's becoming, it's still rather niche, it's still rather fringe. So when the other members of the congregation are seeing people, show up, new faces show up consistently again, they're like, man, okay, these people have obviously like specifically sought out this parish. Let's get them involved. And that's exactly what we experienced. And the friendships and the relationships that we've cultivated in such a short time, we never had that experience at the Novus Ordo. And again, this is not to disparage those people. They're wonderful people. Going to, the Novus Ordo that we went to was key in me, coming back to the faith. And I love them dearly. But there was a difference there. And, we got involved in the community really, really, really quickly, because it's easy to kind of want to go to church and then leave, but then you don't have a place to complain about a lack of community, a lack of interaction with other Catholics if you're not actually staying there to, plant these seeds. So this whole idea of the trads being stuffy and uppity and, closed off is totally not true. Some people may have that experience, but I've never had that experience. These things were absolute constructs in my own mind that I had made up in order for me to cope and justify not going. And in fact, kind of to wrap this all up, these are the greatest decisions that I had made for myself and for my family, for my faith and for their faith. And it's something that we've grown to love the more that we go every single week. So what's the point of this video? Well, the point of this is, if this is you and you've wanted to go and you've got this sense, but you didn't want to make the necessary sacrifices, and it's going to take a sacrifice, but what else is Sunday made for other than a sacrifice for the Lord and to rest in the Lord? So why not? Why should we not orient that entire day to the Lord? So if you feel this calling on your heart, but you're like, man, this requires a lot, I don't feel like I'm very welcomed here, I hope these 2 points shine a necessary light on the fact that we've got to look inward at our actual reasoning. I didn't want to put in the effort. So I created all these, I tried to rationalize, I tried to cope in all these different ways to prevent me from going. But really, I couldn't ignore this pull, this call to go and get involved in the traditional Latin Mass community. And this is not because I have a heart or a soul of being a schismatic. Absolutely not. We're in communion with Rome. We submit to the Roman pontiff, all this other stuff. Like I'm not, Vatican II is invalid, council and all this other stuff, all this other garbage. Yeah, nobody in the congregation believes that. No trad that I've met believes that. And so, there certainly is this idea that as soon as you start going to the TLM that you're a schismatic, but those people are delusional anyways, and this is not for those people. So if this shines any sort of light and convicts you to go, I would encourage you to go, because it is truly life-changing. And so I want to be one of those guys that, instead of punching down and telling people and shaming people that where they're going is nonsense and their children are going to fall away from the faith, however that may be true, whatever, I don't think that's a very good way of going about it. And so if it wasn't for my good friend, Brian Holdsworth, who is always so loving, always so charitable, always so inviting, it wasn't kind of finger wagging. It was always like, hey man, come, we want to see you. You know, we want you to get involved. We know how hard it is, but it's worth coming. And he was always just so positive. I want to be that positive light, just like he is, to anybody that's watching this. So if you're watching this and you feel inspired to go, but you kind of have these ideas, it's worth the sacrifice. It's worth reorienting your schedule for. It's worth making the necessary sacrifices and changes to drive there if it's a long drive, to, you know, form your children's schedules, sleep, eating, whatever. It's difficult. Okay. Don't feel embarrassed if your kids don't want to sit in the pews. This is very, very common. My children don't. Sometimes they didn't, and sometimes they still don't. But the fruits have been made manifest in just a short time going, and it's worth it. And other families are going through the same thing. So you're not alone there either. Look at yourself, look at your line of reasoning. And if these two reasons are part of why you don't go, I think you need to reevaluate, and I think you need to go. And if you've never checked out a traditional Latin Mass before, please do. Even if it's an hour, 2 hours away, please go. It'll change your life just like it changed mine. So that's it. Glory to Jesus Christ. You want to support this channel, just like, comment, subscribe. That's all I really ask of you. And if you're a Catholic man wanting fitness coaching, I'm going to leave my application in the description below, and as well as my merch site, which has got some pretty cool Catholic gear. But that's it. At the very least, please like, comment, share, subscribe. Share this with somebody that wants to go to the TLM, but feels intimidated by it, because listen, we were all there. All right. That's it. Glory to Jesus Christ, and we'll catch you in the next one.